Elizabeth Warren's moment. All right, and thanks for staying with us this Saturday morning. The number of women accusing Bill Cosby of assault, or in this latest instance of drugging her by spiking her coffee, that number has now risen to at least 20. We're going to be looking into whether that accuser marks a watershed moment of sorts as the fallout keeps mounting for the legendary comedian. Also this hour, the big story at the beginning of the week was the torture report. And this morning, we have new evidence measuring just how much the revelations contained within that report appear to be resonating with the country. But we want to begin this hour with more on the funding fight. It's not really about keeping the government open, which is now tearing Washington apart. Within the last 36 hours, we've learned just how powerful Elizabeth Warren is, and her influence in the wake of all of this only figures to grow. It was Senator Warren who sparked a revolt over a Wall Street-friendly provision in the bill to keep the government open, and who urged Democrats on the other side of Capitol Hill, Democrats in the House, to stand with her. And that's what happened. That's what helped to get Nancy Pelosi on board, at least publicly. And once that happened, suddenly that government funding bill that everyone figured would sail through this week was in major jeopardy.
I urge my colleagues in the House, particularly my Democratic colleagues whose votes are essential to moving this package forward, to withhold support from it until this risky giveaway is removed from the legislation. We all need to stand and fight this giveaway to the most powerful banks in this country.
Holding up a government funding bill, trying to wrangle up no votes in the other chamber, in the House. In a way, that's a playbook we've seen before from a Republican, and not just any Republican, Ted Cruz. Cruz is with Warren right now on this issue. They are both against this bill, although they are against it for very different reasons. But it was 14 months ago that Cruz and Tea Party Republicans from the House strategized in a now infamous dinner meeting at a Mexican restaurant on Capitol Hill to force the government into a shutdown over their opposition to Obamacare. What Cruz did and what Warren is doing are not exactly the same thing. We know that Cruz was perfectly happy shutting down the government back then. We only know that Warren wanted to blow up this plan to pass a funding bill, not necessarily that she would have voted for a shutdown if it had come to it. But there are broad similarities here. Cruz on the right, Warren on the left, using the drama of critical deadlines to challenge their party's leadership, to rally their party's bases, and to push their pet causes. This is what led a senior House Democratic aide to tell Hardball about Warren yesterday, quote, "She is the Ted Cruz of the Democratic Party, the purist who may stand on principle but refuses to be part of the governing majority." So where does Elizabeth Warren go from here? Does she take this and reconsider a run for president? Does she continue to lead her party on Capitol Hill from the left? What is her role going forward? What does she make of all this? What do they make of all of this? This is our panel I'm asking now. We're joined again by Sahil Kapoor, congressional reporter for Talking Points Memo, Will Cain, host of Real News on The Blaze, Joan Walsh, MSNBC political analyst, editor-at-large for Salon. Joan, I'll start with you. I think I know your answer to this, but Elizabeth Warren, Ted Cruz, that comparison, that parallel, what do you make of it?
So not the same. First of all, she did join the Democratic leadership majority. She has a leadership position that they created for her. Second of all, we have no evidence that she would have shut down the government over this. And third of all, yeah, I think I'm on third. What she is trying to do is stop people from including Democrats, from doing something that they could not do through the legislative process. Ted Cruz was trying to do something with the government shutdown that he could not do through the legislative process. So those are very, very different things. If this were going to be voted on in the Democratic Senate, it would not. This bank provision would not pass. I hope this campaign finance non-reform would not pass. But those are just very different approaches. And in the end, we don't know. I think she was saying we think we have the leverage. We can get, if the Republicans will buckle on this, we can get this provision out. It didn't come to, well, we couldn't get it out. Now we're going to shut the government down.
Right, no, that was the thing. There was always this backdrop of if they could pass a 2-day, and they did. Right. They passed a couple of these extensions. So it's fair to say we didn't know if she actually would shut the government down. But Will, looking at this from the right, when you look at Elizabeth Warren, do you feel like you're seeing somebody like Ted Cruz?
Smiling.
I think I know your answer to this too.
Well, I mean, I think that Jones' analysis, and I mean this with all due respect, is more a reflection of your disdain for Ted Cruz than it is the substantive merits of the comparison.
I think both.
There's a good admission. I think the similarities between the two at this point are so bright that the differences are somewhat lost or should be dimmed. Here's the deal. I like Elizabeth Warren. I like someone that stands upon principle. I like Ted Cruz for the same reasons. I like anyone who votes according to their principles and not necessarily their political expediency. Now, there's a separate question whether it's bad strategy. I think Ted Cruz's strategy a year ago was just simply bad. It wasn't going to accomplish the principle he was
his idea was
today,
we want to just get rid of
Warren,
Obamacare entirely, or we're going to shut down the government.
And I don't think a government shutdown would have eventually led to getting rid of Obamacare entirely. I don't think President Obama would have signed that bill. And I like Elizabeth Warren, not just because she stands on principle. I don't think she'll accomplish her strategy either, therefore damaging the Democrats, splitting their party. So all around, I like her. You stand on principle and you endorse bad strategy on the left. I like it.
Well, Sahil, be the referee here, and let me ask you this, because I saw Lindsey Graham late last night. I stayed up and watched till they adjourned. And Lindsey Graham got down on the Senate floor late at night, and he basically he was mocking the Democrats. He's saying this is what Elizabeth Warren said when Ted Cruz shut down the government, and now she's doing it, and she's part of the problem, and I got people on my side who are part of the problem too, and they're both doing the same thing. And I wonder how much of it is, look, I know this for a fact because I've talked to them when they don't want their names necessarily associated with it. There are a lot of Republicans who view Ted Cruz as a problem in their party, and they love the idea of being able to look at Democrats and say, see, you guys too. We got one, you got another. How much of that is what's motivating this?
I mean, there are some obvious similarities here in that they're both senators who are loved by their base, and they're trying to get the House to do something that they want to do. There are important differences, too, that we need to keep in mind. Firstly, Ted Cruz was trying to add provisions to spending bills that massively change the law. Elizabeth Warren is trying to remove a provision that would, that would change current law. But the bigger difference between these two, and this is really important, is that Elizabeth Warren picks her spots on the issues that she has been fighting for and that she understands very, very well. Financial reform and student loans and education among them. Ted Cruz looks at every issue and sees an opportunity to be a firebrand, to create a stir, and to endear himself to the conservative base, which is not to say he doesn't believe those things. I think he does. But these are two very, very different people, and you're not going to see Elizabeth Warren looking at every progressive issue as an opportunity to just jump out front and create a stir.
Okay, but we had Jim Moran on at the end of last hour saying he thinks she's running for president. And I say I have not thought she's running for president, but moments happen in politics. Nobody thought Barack Obama, candidate for Senate from Illinois in 2004 when he got up to speak at the Democratic Convention, was running for president.
I think people
and then they saw him differently.
I think people immediately thought he would run eventually. They didn't think in 2008.
No, but it was before that speech, they never thought of it.
Is
this one of those moments where they looked at her this week and they saw something different?
Certainly a lot of progressives did, absolutely. I don't think she's running. She said repeatedly she's not running. I don't think she wants to run. I don't think she's ever gotten up in the morning and said, I want to be president of the United States. Right. And I think in her book she talks about, she now holds Ted Kennedy's seat. That is a position of honor and power.
Scott Brown would say it's the people's seat.
Well, I don't think so. But let me make one more point. I want to speak to something that Congressman Moran said. With all due respect, he's not here to defend himself, but I want to take issue with one thing, and it relates to Elizabeth Warren. He said this is a bill that reflects Democratic principles, and it may be the last time we can do this because Republicans are taking over the Senate. That part is true. This should not be a bill that reflects Democratic principles. If it is a bill that reflects Democratic principles, this party is going to have a civil war. And I think a lot of Democrats are really happy that she's drawing a bright line around the party that has catered to Wall Street. It's both parties. And I would love to see, I don't think I'm going to see it, but I know I'd love to see, she would love to see some cooperation with Tea Party senators who came to power railing against the bailout.
So she, not to get into all the legislative language here, but she proposed an amendment. I guess they're not going to get a vote on it, but the amendment to take the Wall Street stuff out, David Vitter did that with her, right?
Right. David Vitter did side with her on that. I don't think they're going to get it. But the important thing here is that she's probably going to lose this battle as Elizabeth Warren. But I think she's probably going to win the war in the Democratic Party in a major way. This is going to be a huge issue in the 2016 presidential race. People are already asking, where is Hillary Clinton on this? And every progressive group, even if Elizabeth Warren doesn't run, and I don't think she will, every progressive group is going to push the Democratic field toward her.
How can Hillary Clinton do 1/10 of what Elizabeth Warren has done on this? That's what I have trouble seeing.
Yeah, I think that's naive. I think it's a little bit naive and hopeful to think the Democratic Party will adopt Elizabeth Warren's ideals on Wall Street. I think Elizabeth Warren, to your point, won't run because I don't think she thinks she can win. Now, that's a little counterintuitive. Barack Obama was the progressive upstart who beat the Democratic machine and Hillary.
Right.
So there's evidence Warren could say, I could do this too. But look, I don't think the Democratic Party isn't near as anti-Wall Street as Elizabeth Warren would have you believe. And therefore, I don't think the party's going to move to her over the next,
Party leadership is not as anti-Wall Street, but the Democratic base is.
And that's why I say the Hillary question, it fascinates me because that alliance that Will's talking about between the Democratic Party and Wall Street, that is a product of the Clinton years. Right. That's a product of the 1990s. And
that was a deliberate strategy.
If this is where the Democratic Party is moving, if the soul of the Democratic Party is moving where Elizabeth Warren is, I'm looking at Hillary Clinton and I'm saying, how can she credibly stand up there and say anything like Elizabeth Warren is saying and anybody take her seriously?
Well, she can have. First of all, she's not her husband. She did not sign the end of Glass-Steagall. Okay, she did not do that. Now, she's taken some positions on her own. She was the senator who represented Wall Street.
Right, Elizabeth Warren took some shots at her in her book, too,
right,
for her
absolutely.
actions as New York Senator.
With Chuck Schumer. That's problematic, but there's nothing that says she can't evolve on this issue. Politicians evolve. And she can either, because of politics or because of her own morality, see that we've gone too far as a party and as a nation in catering to Wall Street, in privileging the financial sector. The base thinks that. I believe there are people in the Republican base who think that.
There are. Hill and I were talking about this earlier. There is a contingency in the Republican Party, one I would agree with, that thinks we need to rein in Wall Street. The question is how. And without getting into the weeds, it's whether or not layering more regulation upon more regulation is a way to do that, or draw bright lines, cap the size of banks. If you'd gone that way, you might have found Republicans who said, yeah, I can envision something like this and coming together. Well, I don't know that Elizabeth Warren would do that. I think she wants heavy regulation layered on top.
You'd find a coalition for that. I don't know if it would be big enough, though.
I think you're right.
Well, so what is her next? Do we know what her next move is? This kind of came out of nowhere, but do we know where she goes from here?
She continues to put this on the map. She continues to raise the issue. She continues to force the issue, force Democrats to take a stand on the issue. And the interesting thing is, as we were just talking about earlier in your show, not a single Democrat has come out to defend this provision. I don't even know if a single Republican.
We had one on the show. Moran was the first one I heard. We had
but he's defending the bill overall. He's saying it's a compromise, but no one is defending the merits of this Dodd-Frank provision. He's saying that's not a good idea, but we should support the bill overall. So no one was asking for this except the banks. That's the fascinating thing, and that's where Elizabeth Warren has the high ground because no one is actually defending this provision on the merits.
No, and that is, I will say this is just, the thing that makes Ted Cruz so appealing to the base is they get the sense that he is saying the things that the leadership can't say because they're all compromised by their alliances. And Elizabeth Warren, that appeal, and from that standpoint, is very similar. Anyway. Joan Walsh, I want to thank you for joining us this morning. Will and Sile, you'll be back a little bit later in the hour. This same dynamic is playing out right now in a little feud between MoveOn.org, one of Elizabeth Warren's biggest supporters, and former DNC chairman Howard Dean. And tomorrow morning on Up, both sides are going to square off. Howard Dean and a representative from MoveOn, which is trying to recruit Warren into the race. They are both going to join us live. You're not going to want to miss that. And up next, an American icon's stunning fall from grace, the latest allegations against Bill Cosby. Stay with us.